What does it take to turn a bare-handed catfish grab into a career that reaches millions of people? For Hannah Barron, it took no strategy at all, just a cousin with a phone camera, a muddy riverbank in Alabama, and a lifetime of skills nobody thought would matter outside the woods. This is her story, told through what she and the people around her have actually said on camera and in print over the better part of a decade. Hannah Barron was born on July 3, 1996, in Crenshaw County, Alabama, a rural stretch of the state built around farmland, not fame. She grew up there with her parents, Jeff and Lisa Barron, in a household where the outdoors wasn't a hobby. It was simply how time got spent. Her parents divorced when Hannah was around 8 years old. Rather than pulling her away from her father, the split seemed to pull her closer to him and deeper into the woods that would eventually define her entire public identity. Jeff Barron was, and still is, a serious, dedicated hunter, the kind of person who plans a calendar around deer season, turkey season, and hog season. He didn't just take his daughter along for the ride. He taught her to track, to read the land, and to wait. That patience got tested early. In a Hook and Barrel magazine interview, Hannah described killing her first deer at age 8, a 7-point buck, only after her father made her sit through a string of smaller bucks passing by first, a deliberate lesson in restraint before reward. She's also said, in a separate interview with Primitive Patriot Outdoors, that hunting has been part of her life for as long as she can remember, dating back to before she could walk. Long before any of this reached an audience, Hannah was already building a skill set most kids her age never touch. She learned to identify local snakes, run trot lines for catfish, and eventually clean and process a deer herself. Practical outdoor literacy absorbed through repetition, not classrooms. Her mother, Lisa, kept a much lower profile throughout these years and still does, appearing only occasionally in the family's public content, while Jeff became something closer to a permanent on-camera partner. Hannah went on to attend Troy University's College of Communication and Fine Arts, graduating with a Bachelor of Science in 2018. A degree earned while her online following was already beginning to build in the background. The skill that eventually made Hannah Barron famous has a name most people outside the South have never heard: noodling. It means catching catfish by hand, reaching directly into underwater holes, and letting the fish clamp down on your arm so you can haul it out. It sounds almost impossible to believe until you see it filmed. According to Hannah's own account, she didn't have any real social media following until 2016, when a video of her catching a catfish went viral seemingly overnight. The footage, filmed by one of her cousins, showed her pulling a roughly 30-pound flathead catfish out of murky water using nothing but her bare hands. Hook and Barrel magazine later reported that the clip eventually racked up something in the neighborhood of 15 million views. There was no polish to it, no staging, no influencer playbook. That was precisely the point. A young woman from rural Alabama wrestling a fish nearly a third her own body weight, grinning the entire time, read as completely real in a way that a lot of curated social media content didn't. A nickname formed almost immediately and stuck for good: the Catfish Girl. Hannah has talked candidly about the physical reality behind the videos. In that same Hook and Barrel interview, she described her father having had his fingers broken while noodling, and said she's been cut and bitten more times than she can count. Nothing life-threatening, she noted, just good scars. She's even embraced getting bitten as part of the appeal, using the hashtag #GetBit in her own content. The biggest catfish she's personally landed, by her own account, weighed 56 pounds. Standing at roughly 5 feet tall, Hannah never fit the physical stereotype people might expect from someone hauling in fish that size. That contrast between her frame and her strength became part of what made the content so shareable, pulling in an audience that had no prior interest in hunting or fishing content at all. Reaction from inside the traditional hunting and outdoors community wasn't universally warm at first. A young woman openly noodling catfish barehanded and posting it online challenged some long-held assumptions about who that world belonged to. Some dismissed it early on as a gimmick that would fade within a season. Instead, her following kept growing, video after video, year after year. Hannah has been open about not trying to soften or perform femininity for anyone's comfort. She doesn't release every catfish she noodles. By her own description, she'll eat a fish if it's been hurt too badly to survive release, rather than let it go to waste, but otherwise returns most of what she catches to the water. That kind of practical, unsentimental relationship with the outdoors runs through nearly everything she posts, whether it's noodling, bow fishing, or deer season with her father. Her content eventually expanded well past catfish. Deer, turkey, and wild hog hunts with Jeff Barron became a recurring feature across her channels, and she took on editing duties for her father's own YouTube channel, turning what had been a father-daughter pastime into something closer to a shared production operation. Realtree, one of the best-known names in hunting camouflage and gear, brought her on as a pro staffer, a signal of how far her credibility had traveled inside the industry itself, not just on social media. By the mid-2020s, her combined following across platforms had grown into the millions. Instagram alone crossed 1.7 million followers, with a substantial audience on YouTube, Facebook, and TikTok as well. For an audience that had never watched a single hunting video before her clips started circulating, she became something close to an entry point into an entire subculture. Not everything about Hannah Barron's life has played out in tidy, camera-ready segments. Around 2016, she began a relationship with hunter Ryan Horton, a fellow hunter who became a regular presence in her posts and videos for the next few years. The two hunted together, traveled together, and were, by all appearances online, a well-matched pair built around the same lifestyle. That relationship ended without any public explanation. Multiple outlets covering her biography have noted that she was previously engaged to Horton and that the relationship dissolved sometime after, with neither party offering a public account of what happened. For a creator whose entire career is built on sharing daily life, that silence stood out. As of her more recent biographical coverage in 2025 and 2026, Hannah has been described simply as single, with no confirmed public relationship since. It's worth being direct about something here. A lot of secondary biography sites and social clips speculate freely about her personal life. Other names, other relationships, other rumors, without any confirmation from Hannah herself or verifiable reporting behind them. None of that speculation is repeated here, because none of it holds up to scrutiny. What's documented is that she experienced a real, unexplained relationship ending in the public eye, handled it privately, and kept working. The most serious moment in Hannah Barron's public story didn't happen to her directly. It happened to her father, and she was the one who had to tell the world about it. In early January 2024, Jeff Barron climbed into a friend's tree stand to inspect it before hunting season. When he stepped onto the platform, the top strap failed and gave way. He fell somewhere between 18 and 20 feet straight to the ground, hard enough to be knocked unconscious. When he came to, he had no phone with him and was alone in the woods. What happened next is documented in a video Hannah posted at the time and reported by outlets including Realtree. Jeff Barron got up, walked roughly 400 yards through the trees, climbed a fence, and drove himself home. At the hospital, doctors found that he had fractured vertebrae in both his neck and his lower back. In the video Hannah recorded from his hospital bedside, she told fans plainly that he was lucky to be alive and lucky not to be paralyzed, and that the family's focus had shifted entirely to making sure he took the recovery seriously so it didn't end up costing him his mobility permanently. It's a kind of moment that puts an entertainment career in perspective fast. The accident didn't end the Barron's hunting life, but by all accounts it reset how the family thought about risk, safety, and what actually mattered when the cameras were off. In March 2024, Hannah Barron became the subject of a very different kind of viral moment, one she didn't ask for. A political commentator and former pageant contestant named Samira Khan posted criticism of a video showing Hannah and her father doing hands-on construction work on their family home. Khan's comments went well beyond simple criticism, arguing that Hannah's southern accent needs to be illegal, that women shouldn't do manual labor like that, and making sweeping claims that American women in general aren't feminine. The post spread fast, reportedly pulling in tens of millions of views within days. Hannah's response didn't come from a PR team, and it didn't come with any defensiveness. In an Instagram video posted shortly after, she said plainly that people trying to offend her were too late. She'd been picked on her whole life and grew up around men, so the comments didn't land the way they were probably meant to. She encouraged people watching to build their own identity instead of trying to fit into someone else's box, framing the whole episode as a non-issue rather than a wound.
The response resonated. Outlets across the political and cultural spectrum picked up the story, largely siding with Hannah and criticizing the original comments as needlessly cruel and, to many, absurd on their face. What had been designed as an attack on her accent and her lifestyle instead became a moment that introduced her to an entirely new audience, people who had never watched a noodling video in their life, now seeing her calm, unbothered response to an attempted takedown. It's a pattern that shows up more than once in her public life. Criticism aimed at her identity, her voice, her physicality, the fact that she does unfeminine work, tends to get met with a shrug and a redirection back to authenticity, rather than an argument. Whether or not that's a deliberate strategy, it's been consistent. Behind the videos, Hannah Barron and her father built something more durable than a following, an actual business. In September 2023, Jeff and Hannah co-founded a CBD company aimed specifically at outdoorsmen, hunters, and travelers, a natural fit given the physical toll noodling, hunting, and manual labor take on a body over years. It wasn't a random trend chase. It was built around the exact audience they'd already spent close to a decade cultivating. Alongside that, Hannah developed a personal merchandise line under the Barron Outdoors name and picked up sponsorship relationships with outdoor and fitness brands, including a partnership with the sports nutrition company First Form, which has featured her in its own promotional content teaching other creators and influencers how to noodle. Her Realtree Pro staff position added another layer of industry credibility beyond pure social media metrics. Jeff Barron, meanwhile, spent part of this period building a home for the family by hand, a project Hannah publicly thanked him for in a Father's Day post, crediting him not just for teaching her to hunt and clean a deer before she was even 10 years old, but for literally building the roof over her head. At 30 years old, Hannah Barron's story doesn't really follow the arc of a typical viral moment that fades after a news cycle. It's closer to the opposite, a decade-long build, powered by consistency rather than a single stunt. She's stayed close to her father, both as a hunting partner and now as a business partner. She weathered a relationship ending in public silence rather than turning it into content. She sat beside her father's hospital bed after an accident that could have been catastrophic and chose to talk about it honestly instead of staying quiet. And when a stranger tried to humiliate her for her accent and her willingness to do physical work, she answered with a shrug instead of a scandal. None of that fits neatly into a headline built around rumors or scandal, because very little of her actual public record is scandalous at all. What it adds up to instead is a fairly straightforward story about someone who grew up learning patience in a deer stand, picked up a strange regional skill nobody expected to matter, and built a career by refusing to be anything other than exactly what she already was. That, more than any single viral clip, seems to be the real reason millions of people keep watching.